Hey everyone, I'm Sonny. I'm a principal engineer at Stacklet. Today we'll be talking about safe policy rollouts with GitOps. I guess Umair wanted me to define it. My definition for this is basically do things the automated way, not the not so automated way, and to leverage tools that developers are very familiar with, like Git and pull requests review model and stuff like that. So get started. Going over a quick, very brief cloud custodian 101. Cloud custodian allows you to govern your cloud resources with a YAML-based DSL and supports AWS, Azure, GCP, as well as a little bit of Kubernetes and OpenStack support. The basic gist is you write filters and actions to target specific resources. In this example, we see that we have a policy called EC2 tag instances, where we're going to be targeting EC2 instances, looking for the filter, looking for the tag cost center engineering, and then tagging it as marketing. So this is great because it allows you to write a bunch of policies very quickly to address all sorts of concerns you have within your organization. Additionally, it allows users to dry run to see results without running actions, as well as a whole other slew of features, but we'll just focus on the dry run bit for now. So we've been hearing a lot about governance as code, continuous integration, DevOps, GitOps today, and I think it's important to take a look at where we're going into the future, which is compliance as code or governance as code. And this especially is important because we're going to be looking at things that could potentially have adverse effects on your existing cloud infrastructure that may or may not be tested to the full extent that like application code is tested, right? So for example, in that previous example we saw, we're changing the value of a tag from engineering to marketing, but let's say you have a typo where you misspell engineering, or you misspell the target tag marketing or whatever. That could have a lot of consequences for like reporting, or in an even scarier situation, you might be deleting non-compliant resources or modifying them. So those are sort of the stakes that we have when writing custodian policies, and I think people that have experience with cloud custodian know that very real consequence. But on the other hand, we don't want to be too slow or laggard or scared to make changes, because ultimately you go into the cloud to try to be as fast and as adaptable as you can. And so we really need to figure out a framework for how do we deploy custodian policies safely. First of all, just sort of table stakes, we want to make sure that we have the actual separation of environments. This is important in the sense that everyone should be doing this as a best practice. But if you're not doing this, or you're trying to get to this point in your organization's maturity, that's fine. We can still work with it. The main reason why we don't want to just stuff everyone into a mono account where we just have VPC boundaries for things like dev, QA, production, is that not every resource type is actually separated on a VPC boundary. And of course, right now I'm talking specifically about AWS, and a lot of the examples are going to be about AWS, but this can apply to other clouds as well. So for example, S3, SNS, SQS, and IAM don't live within a VPC boundary, which means that if you're targeting them and you're like, hey, I just want to hit the dev ones, there is always going to be a chance that you're going to be inadvertently filtering in production resources or QA resources. Additionally, separating on account boundaries gives us the most peace of mind because the credentials do not span multiple accounts for the most part, right? There are ways that you can get cross-account access to look at resources, but for the most part, it's very separated, and that makes life a whole lot easier when you're developing policies. Additionally, it lets us specify different IAM permissions, right? So let's say in your dev account that you're totally okay with deleting resources or modifying them. In the production account, maybe that's not the case. And additionally, just because we're going to have multiple accounts and multiple IAM roles doesn't mean that it's going to be hard for us to necessarily manage that. Cloud Computing has built-in ways to do assume roles to go into other accounts, as well as support for static credentials if you need to do it that way. But obviously, we highly recommend using assume role. Let's next talk about using Git. So I'm sure a lot of people here are familiar with Git, but for those that don't, it's source control versioning software that allows you to have a historical audit trail of your source code. It truly enables collaboration. There's other options out there, but Git is definitely the one that's sort of eating the world, and it's definitely the most popular. It integrates with a lot of continuous integration tools. Today we'll be talking mostly about GitHub, but Bitbucket and other source control software also has, or GitLab, they also have all these hooks as well. The pull request model also enables us to have collaboration on all sorts of code, and then especially now as we're talking about governance as code, this also applies to policy changes. And the best part of it is that you're probably already familiar with it. If you're KubeCon, or you have contributed or looked at the Kubernetes open source project, you're already halfway there. The next tool we'll talk about is a little bit less well known. It's called Policy Stream, and this is inside the Cloud Custodian Toolbox. There's another talk later on today that's going to be diving deep into some of the other tools in Cloud Custodian as well. But the basic gist is we can use Policy Stream to get policy files that show the difference between one commit to the other. So if you want to see, hey, show me all of the changes to policies from commit 1 to commit 2, or commit A to commit B, it'll spit out a file, and then you can use that as a reference point to sort of check whether or not the changes that you made are going to have adverse effects. And there's a link here. I'll be also linking at the end. There's going to be a reference slide, so feel free to take a screenshot then. But yeah, let's talk a bit about a example workflow that we're going to go over. So a new compliance policy is requested after an audit, or you have some sort of like federated policy authoring where you have multiple teams across the company writing policies. At that point, a cloud engineer decides, hey, I'm going to write a custodian policy, and they commit the changes to a branch and create a pull request. The question you have to have here is, did they check how many resources are going to get affected, and did they see if any of their changes are going to affect any other policy? This is obviously important because you don't want to make changes that are going to drastically affect your production workloads or even your dev workloads, and sort of be a roadblock for your developers. Additionally, did the total number of resources affected go over a threshold? And what is that threshold? For some people, it's maybe it's going to be 5 resources, or maybe it's going to be 100 resources, or maybe it's going to be a percentage of resources. The problem is that isn't necessarily defined from what I've seen, and people sort of have like gut feelings about it. So if we can standardize that, that would be great. So here is an example of how we could sort of make it all happen. Here we see that we have a GitHub pull request, as well as some a few GitHub comments. And here we see 2 tables, one showing the resource count. So each policy shows how many resources the new version of the policy has, as well as how many resources the original has, as well as the delta and in percentage. So in this case, we have the new policy only filters 1. It previously was filtering 16, which is a delta of -15 and a 93% decrease. And of course, we'll be going over this and seeing how exactly we were able to come up with all this. So there's sort of 2 things here. The first of which is this Terraform module. So this can be thought of as like a proof of concept for how to get this all set up. It does all work out of the box. And what it does is it'll stand up a code build project, as well as upload a few scripts into S3 and sort of do the whole workflow end to end, where it'll test all your policies, make a GitHub comment, send it back, also send a status check as well. To get started, there's a few variables that you can fill out. The first of which is a accounts YAML file location. So for those that are unfamiliar with C7.org, it's basically a tool that lets you run Cloud Custodian across your entire organization, which means that you just have to define a YAML file that says, here are all my accounts, here are the roles, here are the account IDs and tags or whatever, and it'll go and execute custodian in parallel for you. Additionally, you can see that we're basically allowing you to also set a resource threshold, in which case right now it's defaulting to 10, as well as a resource threshold percent, which means a value between 0 and 1, or actually it can go even higher, of the percentage change in the number of resources. So if we go and take a look at this example repo, and of course the links will be provided at the end of the talk, and click into the one, the pull request, we can see our previous example here. I'll zoom in a little bit, and it'll show you, your policy execution results. So this is all driven through a combination of C7.org, C7 and policy stream, the GitHub Python package, which sends the comments out, and stuff like that. So if you want to see an example of a policy that doesn't trigger a failure, you can see here that we added a new policy called another S3 example. The delta percentage is infinity because it went from 0, but that doesn't block us on actually merging the PR because the status check was successful. So what can we learn about, or what can we take away from this? The first of which is testing your cloud custodian policies isn't something that each developer has to do on their own. Testing against a dummy account with very limited access. We can set up CI systems that run all this whenever pull request gets pushed, whenever commit gets pushed, and send actionable feedback to the committer to say, hey, these changes are rather extreme because we're going to be hitting, X number of additional resources. Really lets you safely roll out policies because you get that automated feedback. You get people in the pull request comments saying, hey, this is, I think something is kind of weird here. I think it's, targeting way too many resources that we were assuming we're going to get targeted in the first place. And basically get you that nice feedback loop for developers to really see instantly what the problems are. Additionally, in terms of the amount of time that it takes, we can see inside this code build job, it started at 9:07, ended at 9:08. It's relatively fast because we're only running policies against the diffs. We're not running the entire policy set. And that's all due to policy stream as well. And we'll go back and take a look at this example here. So basically what's happening is we're just saying, hey, let's use this module from GitHub, this Terraform module. You will have to supply a GitHub token, which comes in the form of a variable, as well as specifying a few things like what base branch you want to compare against, what's your GitHub repo for your policies, and then you can also specify stuff like tags as well for all your resources. So that's it. I'd be happy to take any questions. Let's see, I guess Umair, are you back on?
Yep, I'm back. Thanks, Sonny.
And here's our reference page as well, if you want to take a screenshot.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have post some of these decks too. Let me just look at the Q&A really quickly. So if you have any questions for Sonny, we do have about 3-4 minutes, so we can take a couple of questions maybe. Any questions? Feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A. Let me just double check if I see any. So while we wait, what do you think about custodian so far, Tony?
Well, I guess I forgot to mention, I've been working on custodian for since like 2017, 2018 or so. So definitely been in the community for a while. Been seeing lots of great growth. I mean, like the addition of Azure GCP was great, as well as all the additional tools like C7 org also. It didn't come out originally, but it's great for executing custodian scale. And there's a whole bunch of additional really nice tools that I'm sure will get covered in the upcoming talks. But I think like definitely poke around. And I think Liz has a question. Where have you seen this successfully implemented using GitOps? Previously at Capital One, and also I was at Hulu before. These are sort of table stakes that I personally consider when setting up custodian, because ultimately, if you're not confident in the changes you're rolling out, that leads to a lot of nights where you're wake up in the middle of the night thinking, did I push a change that is going to be problematic? And I prefer not to live that way. So I think that's one way to sleep better at night. And I think there's a lot of other companies and organizations that have done this as well. I don't think there's been that many people that have talked about it explicitly. Again, this is sort of like a reference architecture for it. Feel free to take it and modify it as you need. It mostly targets GitHub and does support GitHub Enterprise. But yeah, thanks for the question, Liz.
Great. Any other questions? Let me just check the Q&A. Maybe it's getting closer to lunchtime. Questions have slowed down a bit. Going once, going twice. So I know, Sonny, there's a bit of a delay at times. So if you can keep an eye on the Q&A tab, we'll definitely make sure that if anyone asks a question, I ping you and you can reply there directly too. Because of the streaming at times, the question by the time I see it and approve it, it takes a few more minutes. So apologies for that. I do not see any other questions. So I do see. Again, thank you so much for doing this, Sonny. Yeah. And I think there was a question in internal Slack. How are you using a background? We don't see you now, but how are you using a background? All this is probably wondering. We don't see you.
Using a virtual camera, but I'll be in the chat. I'll answer questions. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Great. Thanks, Sonny.